That's clearly what happened, right?
That I know it's hard to not jump straight to that as well because that there was such a weird dynamic at first, like the whole thing about where they arrive and they're like, all right, there's a master bedroom and then two other rooms. And so he's like,
Yeah.
well, I guess, Lockie, you'll be with me. And then Piper's like, oh, well, he can sleep with me. And he's like, no, that's weird. But then it ends up being even more weird that he shares the room with his brother because his brother's like crossing some strange boundaries. They
Hmm.
just like lock eyes while he's standing there, half erect and fully nude. And that was, I don't know what to make of that. Hey everybody, welcome to our channel. In this video series, we're going to be discussing our favorite show on television, The White Lotus Season 3, and we're so excited to get into it. We also have a podcast called Men's Search for Meaning, where we chat about and explore all kinds of relatable concepts and facts of life. So if you enjoy the discussion, then subscribe and be sure to check out some of our other videos on this channel. All right, episode 1. I'm thrilled to be back with season 3. We watched the first season together a while ago, and it was a show that you knew nothing about. I had seen before already, and we really enjoyed watching it together. They do such a great job with the social dynamics, in addition to the beautiful cinematography and music, and just the locations they choose usually are so pleasing to watch, in addition to a very interesting story told through some clever characters and at times tense social dynamics. So that seems to be the stage they've set for us again as well. It's nice to see some familiar faces here with the characters, in addition to some new people to get to know. Um, so yeah, we hope everyone watching will join us throughout this series. We're going to put these out weekly along with the episodes. So if you enjoy watching it, we think you'll enjoy discussing it with us as well. And we're curious to hear your theories below. We'll be coming up with our own throughout this episode. So first things first, I guess, what stood out to you? Glad to be back watching this. Where are you at?
Yeah. I just love the creepiness of the music. They capture that so well where you're just like, "Ooh, is something off? Is
Yeah,
something wrong?"
yeah.
But it's like a little exotic and seductive and uh, almost like the uncanny valley of music or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what stood out? Well, quite a few things. Some things that are more like just mundane and interesting, and some things like there was one big surprise in the episode.
Yeah,
You caught that, right?
yeah. Well, if we're thinking about the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing, there was something that I would definitely call a big surprise.
Which was the reappearance of Greg,
The reappearance of Greg
who,
with in a new couple, supposedly,
yes.
and the way that his girlfriend or whoever introduced herself to the other person feels like there's potentially a game afoot here, as we've known
Hmm.
Greg to be associated with. So yeah, that maybe we can save for last because I think that's the juiciest piece, and it might take some time to jog our memories how the last season actually ended entirely. Um, what do you think about discussing the different groups of characters one at a time, just moving
Yeah,
through in no particular order?
that's where I was going to go. So maybe we could start with the Ratcliffe family since they seem quite central.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my first impression is that the show was kind of punching the selfish, kind of checked out Southern stereotype of like a rich Southern family that doesn't give a shit about you and will act the way they feel like acting, just like they're back home, even when they're in a foreign country.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're really punching that stereotype hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a juicy, interesting stereotype to watch because it's a very unlikable stereotype in terms of the parents in different ways.
Yeah.
Um, and then the
And
kids are interesting. I mean, yeah. Let me let you respond to that. Yeah.
they showed that staff member, Sritala, I think her name was, the
Hmm.
older woman with the gray hair. They
Oh
showed her
yeah, yeah.
respond to that family by like being like, okay, show them to the rooms. Like she was tired of hearing about uh, their antics and whatnot. So that seems in line with the stereotype that you're describing. That the person who should be gracious to people spending a lot of money there was still kind of like could only handle them so much before wanting to move on to the next group, and she didn't act that way with anybody else.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they were sort of obnoxiously or cluelessly oversharing
Yeah.
just details of their life. Like who does that? That's a very socially gauche thing to do.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, go ahead.
so
I just wanted to add that piece.
yeah, yeah, no, that I'm glad you did. The kids were certainly interesting. We have cocky Saxon,
Yep.
um, douchey, kind of is full of himself, interesting character.
Yep.
And then Piper, who just seems like a pure character from what I can tell.
Hmm.
Um, and then Lachlan, who is realizing he's gay. That was an interesting piece. That's clearly what happened, right?
That I know it's hard to not jump straight to that as well, because that there was such a weird dynamic at first, like the whole thing about where they arrive and they're like, all right, there's a master bedroom and then two other rooms. And so he's like,
Yeah.
well, I guess, Lockie, you'll be with me. And then Piper's like, oh, well, he can sleep with me. And he's like, no, that's weird. And I see where he's coming from. I think a lot of people will be like, oh, yeah, something feels a bit off about um, a brother and a sister that are like, in their late teens, early 20s, sharing a bed together. That could seem odd. Um, but then it ends up being even more weird that he shares the room with his brother, because his brother's like crossing some strange boundaries. And then he's like, I'm going to go in the bathroom to masturbate. And then leaves the door open and then sees his brother staring and isn't like, bro, what are you doing? What the hell? Doesn't react. They
Mhm.
just like lock eyes while he's standing there, half erect and fully nude. And that was, I don't know what to make of that. There was no like, there was no reaction I would have expected in that situation where like he quickly turns away or, something. So no idea what they're setting up there. I was thinking about while watching the episode that they probably understand what a viewer is thinking to some degree, and then you can start to play with that. Because there was a scene where he's like, what am I going to do all week? Just eat fruit, and he picks up a fruit and she's like, don't eat that one. The seeds are poisonous. And he's like, could it kill you? And she's like, yes, it could. And the first thing I thought was like, oh, foreshadowing. And then I was like, oh, wait, but they know that you're going to think that that is probably going to come into play. And it could just be a misdirection to keep you guessing, and that's one thing the show does well, is to not allow you to figure out even the nature of what you can expect to occur. We know there's a gunfight of some kind at the end. There's private security there
Mhm.
with guns. We have no clue, what's going to happen. But I love that they don't make it easy to figure out, and they intentionally, I think, throw out misdirections because it makes it a much better watch.
Yes, I would agree. I would have to guess the poisonous fruit will come back later. That is just too classic and good
Yeah,
of a device
maybe
to not
accidental.
use.
Yeah,
Yeah, something like that. Like, there's got to be some tragedy. First of all, what resort has deadly fruit just lying about on the ground? Like, you would get rid of that tree if you're a five-star resort. Just leave fruit that
yeah,
someone could eat and would kill them.
yeah,
It's like someone's probably going to eat it at some point.
yeah.
And it's such a lush land as they're in, where you do kind of feel like, oh, everything's here for the taking.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah, I mean,
back on track. Going back to the what are they? The Ratcliffe family.
yeah, Ratcliffe,
Okay.
yeah, I think it's or Ratliff or something. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So back to the tender incestuous moment.
yeah. So for some reason, I had the feeling at first that Lachlan or his sister Piper were attracted to each other. I was like, oh, we're going right into incest. When they were talking about sleeping in the same bed, I guess not for some reason. They did set it up as that's interesting,
I also had that
and they seem
reaction.
to
There
have.
was there was something that clued me into being like, is this going to be a theme that comes up in the show? Like, I don't know how they created that feeling, from a situation
Mhm.
where it could be nothing, but I also latched onto that and was like, something about this feels weird.
Yeah, they seem to have like a secret or like a flirty dynamic in that one scene where they're talking about the bed, and when they at first when they walked out to kind of see that tower together or whatever.
Hmm.
But then I'd say it went away when they just had a fairly normal, like, hey, if you're not going to go check out the tower or whatever he meant by that, I'm just going to go back. He didn't seem to care about being alone with her, so it's like, okay, I guess there's no brother sister
Yeah.
incest happening.
But maybe that's the older
Um,
brother thing, because he reacted very weird and jealous in a way to them
Mhm.
being bonded. Like he needed to insert himself in there, whether it be in the sleeping situation or the plans for the day. He seems to really be one of those personalities that ends up being off-putting when you're interacting with them, because they're like trying too hard to be pushy and make things happen, and he's kind of bullying the girl to as a way of interacting with her and pushing the um pushing Lachlan around. So yeah, getting some weird vibes from the older brother most of all.
For sure. But I mean, I don't see how there could not be some incest in the fact that Lachlan really was staring at his older brother. I don't understand how that is just the way he feels. How do you feel? I guess I can't understand how he could possibly feel that way towards his older brother.
Yeah,
But but he was really like, eyeing him like he was like a sexy stranger that he had only
yeah,
met recently or something like that. And I'm like, that's such an unnatural thing to do.
yeah.
But
The
he
unbroken eye
clearly was.
contact. Yeah, the unbroken eye contact and the look on his
Yes.
face. Like I wonder what the directing was in that scene to that actor, because he was like, I mean, I could never begin to capture that, but he it was almost like a longing kind of look. There was
Hmm.
something weird to it.
Right. And then he had a little moment of like, oh, that was weird. I'm talking about Lachlan after he was staring at his brother's naked body, as if like, oh, am I gay? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Like that is what I picked up. Did you pick that up too? Because he had a moment where he was just like,
I didn't think about that being the potential, like uh the first time he thought about it, or like where something clicked into place. I didn't notice that
mhm.
moment quite so much. I think maybe because I was still processing like what the hell was that before, like, and trying to think,
Yeah.
is there any reasonable explanation for this? I can't come up with one. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. He does
Hmm.
kind of have like what in shows can be sort of a stereotypical gay personality, where, or at least for a young person, where they might not fully understand their sexual identity yet, where he's like
Hmm.
kind of timid and, isn't willing to stand up to his parents and has that degree of trepidation, or isn't very sure of himself, which I've noticed TV shows and movies will oftentimes use that trope for an emerging, gay character as one way to tell that story. So it's possible that we're seeing that
Yeah.
as well.
Totally.
We'll get right back to the video, but first we want to remind you that if you're enjoying the discussion, to please hit that like and subscribe button, and also to check out our podcast, Men's Search for Meaning, on this same channel, where we explore and get into all kinds of relatable things about life. So if you want to spend some more time with us, check out those episodes too after this one, and let's get back to it. What about the parents? I mean, the
Oh yeah.
father is definitely tied up in some shady business dealings. He said, "Oh, I don't talk to Kenny anymore." Seconds later, he's talking to Kenny. So, he clearly was giving an avoidant answer. He seemed disturbed by this coming to light, so he's aware that this could come back to bite him, and it is. The wife is kind of blissfully unaware, and their dynamic is very disingenuous, I found, where her way of being affectionate is just complimenting his achievements and idealizing his
Right.
relationship with his children, where she's like, you have three children who worship you, and it's like,
Hmm.
they definitely don't worship him. They seem like they tolerate him, and are, even don't like him in a number of contexts in the small exposure that we've had. So yeah, they have an interesting dynamic together, and their personalities independently are both, to me, equally off-putting in totally different ways.
Yes. I had a slightly different read of the dad. I mean, I
Mm,
also was put off by him and didn't like him.
hmm.
I see him as someone that genuinely does not know that his business dealings were shady because of the fact that he seemed surprised by the Wall Street Journal reporter. Well, first of
Hmm.
all, you probably don't love it if a Wall Street Journal reporter calls you unless you've just done some heroic achievement, sailed across the Atlantic in a canoe or something, and
Yeah.
you probably don't love that. That's not great. He seemed not that disturbed by it. Then had the call and could see that it was an investigative kind of call where they're going to publish a hit piece that's probably going to rain um, investigation and stress and possibly uh, criminal related effects on him.
Hmm.
So I could feel the pressure and the tension that he felt after that call. And I took it as he hasn't spoken to Kenny in 4 years. Like I believed him. Now, maybe I interpreted it wrong and
Hmm.
he was just calling. You could call someone you haven't spoken to in 4 years since you created that shell company and did a quick investment and you made a few $1 million. You didn't think much of it because Kenny assured you it's fine, it's clean.
Hmm.
That's just the way we do our investments or whatever.
Hmm.
That's how I took it because he seemed genuinely disturbed.
Yeah.
Um,
That'll be interesting to
but
see. I'm sure they'll
yeah, I
reveal it
don't
to
know.
us. Something about the casting of the dad, or perhaps just small behavioral mannerisms, give me a read that he's a little bit of a cutthroat, kind of like maybe not a totally villainous, evil person, but willing to turn a blind eye and kind of ignore the harm that he may cause in certain situations. So just
Oh,
mentioning
definitely.
that, yeah, just mentioning that to see. I like to put my predictions out there to see, how they turn out. So, um, yeah, that's probably as much as we need to say maybe about that family to start. Who's the
Well,
next? Oh,
there was one other bizarre thing that we could bring up now, or when we talk about one other couple, but maybe
yeah.
it's worth bringing up now,
Uh,
which is Timothy's perception of the parking lot interaction that he had with Rick, the guy that's always negative, that
I can tell
is
you wrote
super
these names
upset.
down because I'm like, who the fuck is Timothy?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I have a character list that I'm looking at
Yeah.
because I would never remember these names ever, even if they were repeated 10 times. So yeah, Rick is like the older boyfriend guy who's like just super negative and not
Yeah.
chill about anything.
Walton Goggins. I
Um,
really like that actor. He's done some great shows that I've watched.
okay, I don't actually know him.
Yeah.
And then yeah, Timothy is the dad character. We've been talking about
Oh,
the Ratcliffe
Timothy.
dad.
Wow.
Yeah, apparently that's his name.
Okay.
Um, So I should just call him the dad though, because it's confusing to know his name, given that it was probably said like one time.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so he had this perception of his interaction in the parking lot
Yeah.
as the other guy was super rude. He said,
Yeah.
"Asshole again,"
Yeah.
and I was pretty sure that he was an asshole to Rick. Rick was just sitting there, and he goes, "How's the night?" And
Yeah.
then he goes, "Fuck off."
Yeah. I think
Unless "How's the night" was meant sarcastically, but
I
yeah.
think he was poking him a little bit. I think their interaction on the boat really set their first impression of each other, and they're just kind of locked into those roles. And I think that's going to be an
Uh,
interesting theme because they talked about in the show, she's listening to her book on tape of the Piper's listening to the book on tape of the monk that she wants to interview, and he says identity is a prison, rich or poor, we're locked into these things. And I'm like, that is definitely them forecasting a key theme of the show. I mean, I guess what show doesn't have that in there, but I think what we're going to see is an intentional exploration in the writing and the directing around that theme. And we saw that happen in this situation. They both had an interaction. I would say that I would put Rick a little more to blame on the boat because smoking has gotten to a place where you can't just smoke wherever you want anymore. Why? Because it interferes with other people's enjoyment. That's different in foreign countries, but it sounds like everyone there is from America, so that's their default. And he did ask pretty nicely, like, "Oh, would you mind going over there?" And but first he kind of made a passive aggressive face of like, so they got off on the
mhm.
wrong foot. I think they're both now playing into those roles a little bit, and I wonder if that will be the entirety of their interaction throughout the show as the tension escalates or something like that. But
Right.
yeah, that was interesting to see how someone can come back and tell a totally different story.
Yeah, it totally was. Yeah, I think that's in that case, that's all. I just had to cover that because I was like, "Oh, I thought the other guy was being an asshole," but,
Yeah,
you reminded me that they had that first interaction and
yeah,
on the boat, and, that makes sense that they now do have just a standing tension with each other.
yeah. Well, that's a good segue to Rick and what's his girlfriend's name? The
I know.
the English girl,
It's Chloe.
yes, Chloe. I don't even know if they
Yes,
mentioned that, but
Chloe.
they might have. Um,
She's she's the woman from Manchester. Or, oh
yeah,
no, I'm sorry, it's not Chloe. I said the wrong name. It's Chelsea. I
Chelsea.
should remember because Chelsea is a a football team in England, and she's
Yeah.
actually from Manchester.
Okay. Um, yeah, so interesting pairing. Clearly a large age gap. I find her bizarrely patient with him, which
Yeah,
might imply that, she's benefiting from the relationship, so she's willing to put up with more or something like that. But he's pretty insufferable. It's hard to imagine a single person would want to be around him unless you just have that total like bullshit back and forth kind of um, relationship, or friendship or whatever, where you kind of just shit on the other person and that's your way of relating to them and that's acceptable. But
yeah, yeah,
he's pretty horribly unpleasant. She makes attempt
yeah.
after attempt, and I'm sure there's more to the story, but he's just kind of like, no, I'm gonna leave.
Yeah. I know. I had that thought too. That like Chelsea is basically compulsively positive, and I'm like, where is she? Where are the receipts for the emotional work she's doing? Like
Yeah,
she's just burying all that. That he treats her terribly and doesn't really give her much of anything that we've seen,
yeah,
and she is just endlessly understanding, ignoring his negativity, and nice.
yeah,
And and I'm like, that doesn't just roll off you. Like you have to like be frustrated by that. It does
yeah,
remind me like I do see people in life sometimes that are just usually it's a young female, sometimes it's a guy, but it's always a young person that is just doing tons of emotional work for anybody they talk to.
hmm,
And I always like kind of feel for them like you don't have to do all that. Just kind of
yeah,
relax. You don't have to be like super nice and on top of everything all the time. You're not like in the service industry.
yeah.
And she seems kind of like she's doing that, but I really can't tell what makes her tick quite
It ma-
yet.
yeah, it makes me think of someone who had a parent like that, and their safety as a child was dependent on placating that parent or trying. It's like
Yeah.
if they could make the parent happy by bending over backwards and doing all these things, then that meant that they were going to have a better day or a better night or something. So she kind of reminds me of that kind of character or kind of person where she's just so used to having done that for a long time. But there comes a time where that person's like, this is not sustainable. Why am I doing this? Hopefully they do some digging and then they can see or, uncover like, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm reenacting this, childhood trauma to some degree. And that's my way of achieving safety in my relationship. But I'm really don't need to stick around with such miserable people. That was my possible read.
Very well put. Very well put.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent read.
Um, so yeah, not a lot to say there. I guess the only other thing that comes to mind is he's clearly that he seems very stressed, which makes me think he's not hanging on by much, and she's there happy to spend his money, and he seems very worried about how he's going to make all that work. So he's holding the burden of some large singular thing. He's holding many burdens, but I think there's one large singular burden he's holding that's related to interacting with the husband of the other owner. It seems like there's a husband and wife owner of this particular um, White Lotus location. I don't know if they're franchises or how that works exactly, or if they own the White Lotus uh, chain of hotels or something. But he's clearly there for some business reason. I see it like he needs to, I don't know, steal from this person or make a deal with them or something like that. And hearing that this person is not going to be there, he seemed acutely stressed and, researching this online later. Your face makes me think
Right.
maybe
But
you got a different read.
well, no, there was just one thing that confused me. Like
Uh,
I can't picture him stealing because he just so outwardly had so much anger that Jim Hollinger, the husband guy, was just not around. He was
yeah,
just like, "Oh fuck,"
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever he said. And if you were trying to be sneaky and rob him or something, you probably wouldn't be um, so out and out about that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. A little more
But
charismatic,
he
maybe.
also right, you would just be like, "Oh, gotcha. Okay, great." But he also said about Sritala, the older woman
Mm,
who owns the resort, is she married or something? Right? Didn't he seem to inquire as if he didn't know?
mm. Yes, I forget what his question was. I do remember he was talking to Mook, and he said Something like that, yeah. And then she kind of gave the backstory, and then he heard that person wasn't going to be there. So yeah, that is confusing, and I think there's so little to grab onto at this point that I'm not even going to try to make a prediction there because there just isn't enough information to go on. But yeah, there's some interesting burden he's carrying that he was, I think, hoping to remove from himself during this trip. Um, Perhaps that. Well, no, I said I wasn't going to make a prediction, so we'll save that. Um, so yeah, where to next? So we have Belinda. Lovely to see Belinda again after a very tragic character from season one. Um,
Yes.
and her son, who we only ever heard on the phone in season one, who played a central role in the opening scene of the show. You know, where there's a bunch of gunfire inside the resort, and he's looking for his mother, who we then learn is Belinda. So yeah, I saw her in the thumbnail for the episode and was wondering, oh, is she on vacation? Like, does this take place? Um, yeah, I don't know. Wasn't sure what a period of time we were in, but I was like, oh, maybe after that stressful time, she's on a vacation herself, but she probably wouldn't have the means to go to a place that's expensive. But she's there, kind of all expenses paid, to learn and bring her teachings back, which kind of implies that she has a more important role at the Maui White Lotus, or perhaps she left the White Lotus after Armand was killed and she works at another wellness center or something. We don't know, but she's still in that wellness space. She doesn't seem to be an owner of anything yet. The trip was kind of facilitated for her, and since it's within the White Lotus network, it made me think that she still worked there, which is
Yeah, I
probably the
think so.
case. So she's there to learn, but what a magnificent thing to just be able to experience the wellness side of things and take your findings back. That's a pretty nice work trip.
Yep, definitely. Very, very nice. 3 months too.
Yeah,
A lot
three
of learning.
months. Yeah, at a pretty nice place. Um, yeah, that's all that I can think of about those two characters. I'm interested to get to know the son a little bit more, just because I found Belinda to be an interesting character from the first season. Um, any other things that you can think of about her?
I, I guess only that, and I think this came up a little bit last season, that there's themes that have to do with race and being black that have to do with her. Like she saw two other black guests and she was excited
Hmm.
that there were black guests and not black staff.
Yeah.
So, just choosing to highlight that in the show. I'm not sure what it means, if it's simply something about her character or if there's going to be themes not just about class, which are always
Hmm.
really clear in White Lotus. There's a lot of commentary on
Yeah.
snotty rich people, which the show is always filled with.
Hmm.
And then, Belinda being a member of the staff
Hmm.
and bringing race into it. So
Yeah.
just throwing that out there because that was one other theme I noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that being, well, the fact that it was dialogue definitely shows that, to me at least, it's intentional and it is something they want to
Yeah.
explore. It was an interesting scene. The woman almost looked like her mother. They had some interesting, like the way they do their hair kind of was similar,
Hmm.
and some of the facial features. I was like, huh, I wonder what that's about. And then they made it clear it's just her recognizing another guest and sort of relishing in a feeling of connection where she might often feel like an other or something like that. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so that was something. I guess with Zion, her son, they implied that he might have been through something. He explained it had been a tough year,
Hmm.
but he didn't say what it was. It could be their shared experience that, perhaps she had a breakdown or something after Armand was killed because she was quite close with him. So yeah, just that was another piece that they alluded to that potentially has some more depth to it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So who do we have left? We have the three um, female friends on a trip together where there's some interesting stuff going on there. We
Hmm.
have the first staff relationship that we've seen, I think, and the most character development we've seen for staff members yet, with Mook and whoever the other employee was that gave her a ride to work. And there's
It's
some
I talk.
What?
I can't believe you don't remember. His name is Guy Talk.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, I do remember that now. Actually, I do remember. I do remember porn chai because that's just an interesting combination of familiar words.
Yeah, it is. Definitely caught that from his name badge. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So that's an interesting connection, and they seem to be portraying him as like the nice guy, where he definitely seems interested in her, and I wouldn't say that she's disinterested in him, but she seems to be um unconsciously more attracted to like the bad boy types or a certain kind of attention,
Yeah.
and he kind of blends into the background a little more, even though he seems like a much more wholesome and reliable person.
Hmm.
So that'll be interesting, and that was the first time they revealed to us that there are guns on site, and I'm sure they did
Hmm.
so because we there was gunfire in the intro scene.
Yeah, that was interesting because those bodyguards both did look arrogant and looked thuggish. Like the
Yeah.
only other time on TV or movies I've seen the demeanor that they were displaying, it was when there's like members of the cartel or drug kingpins.
Hmm.
So I'm not necessarily making that implication. I'm just saying the only other association I have with people with guns that are kind of just like, they're filled with machismo
Yeah,
and
yeah,
arrogance. It's something like that where you're like above the law. So I'm like,
yeah,
I'm intimidated by those characters and like, okay, don't fuck with them because I just get this feeling that life could be cheap around them or
yeah.
they will do what they want. I don't
Yep.
know.
I get that impression as well. And it's making me think, why the fuck are they there? Because at first, when they said
Mhm.
they're there for, God, what's the last name that starts with H? The Hillinger?
Oh, Hollinger, Dan
Hollinger,
Hollinger.
yeah, yeah. I thought that was the Ratcliffe family. I couldn't remember what their name was, and I'm like, oh, maybe that guy's so important that he hired some private security in the area. But it's basically hotel security. That's pretty
Yeah,
shocking. At a place that nice, that there would be armed hotel security. So either they're in an unstable region, which I don't think is a big thing in Thailand. Like I went to Thailand um, a few years ago with my girlfriend for 3 weeks, and we went all over, and I didn't see any signs of political conflict or anything like that. So it's interesting that a very nice place with high profile clientele. I mean, maybe that's part of it. It's high profile clientele to some degree, but it's very strange to have armed guards at a nice hotel. Can you imagine going to a nice hotel and seeing armed guards? It would worry you
never.
more than it would put you at ease.
Yeah, that's just not done. Even if there's celebrities there, the guns are covered.
Yeah,
I mean, even if
because
like the
it
president is
unsettles
there,
people. Yeah,
yeah, of course, yeah, yeah. For some reason, I associated it with Sritala and her famous husband Jim Hollinger.
yeah.
I don't know why. Like maybe the personal security for them. I forget if that was said or if I just
They
assumed
did
it for some reason.
say
But
something
yeah.
about that's their private security for the Hollingers is what they said.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel like they are such a big deal, Sritala and Jim, that they need like a serious personal detail of bodyguards or something like that.
Yeah,
I just get that feeling from the aura that's been built around them and the way that Sritala acts when she's like, "Let them cruise the island," like she
yeah.
displayed tremendous both gravitas and like I'm above everything.
Hmm.
It's not like an owner would of a hotel would normally feel about their guests, or at least act towards the staff.
Yeah,
You at least show some like, oh yeah, well we have to welcome them, of course. I'll be a minute.
yeah.
Instead, it's just like they can wait.
With
Like she,
her team putting her makeup on and stuff out on the beach.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that was
right,
interesting. But then she was very gracious to the guests when they arrived. So there's a hard
yeah,
to pin down character trait that we're seeing there that I'm sure they will unfold. Um,
right.
and I want to talk about the Hollingers in connection with Greg's presence, but maybe before we get there, we can go through the three friends, and you can tell us their
Mhm.
names again.
Well, I just listen so carefully and have such
Yeah.
great memory that that's why I know it. So Jacqueline is I'll call them the middle-aged, female, three friends.
Hmm.
So Jacqueline is the kind of celebrity,
The
the actress
actress.
or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then Kate is the one that she's, like, closer with, who's
Yeah.
tall and, has the fortunate husband and is
Yeah,
super
yeah.
successful, and then Lori is the one
Lori.
who is just Lori. She's the, short blonde
Yeah,
hair, kind of
she's
was
the one who's
dying
struggling more.
inside yeah, with jealousy and, feeling left out and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, I would just comment that, I when she cried, I was like, I thought that was really good acting. It really, like, hurt me. I felt a lot of empathy for her.
Uh-huh.
I could see how much pain she was in, and I think that's more compliment to the actress's acting,
Yeah.
as well. Like, as she was sipping her wine, I was like, "Oh my god, she's dying inside right now,"
Yeah.
watching these 2 women relate about how great their life is, because clearly her life is not that, and it hurts her to hear 2 people, like, sitting there like, "Oh, you look great. Your life is so together. You're
Yeah.
Miss Success, this and that," and she's just like, "My life's in the toilet right now." Like, clearly that's how she's feeling.
And it seems that
So
that is how they
yeah.
feel as well, because they're actively excluding her. They're gushing about each other, and then they look to her and they're like, "You're pretty too," which is just the emptiest
Yeah.
thing you could say in context.
Yeah, well, I didn't take that as intentional. I didn't read Mean Girl. Did you?
I see it as just some of my confusion around how, I'm not going to say women, but how certain women can interact. This is obviously a
Mhm.
stereotype kind of relationship, but I think it's one that we've all seen in one way or another. So I don't think there's any mean spiritedness. I think it's just a very thinly veiled attempt at her trying to avoid saying, like, well, maybe you are a bit less pretty. It's like, it seems to
Mhm.
be that Jacqueline and Kate don't feel quite the same about her, and their attempts to cover it up only betray their true feelings. It's like it is so empty the way they were
Yeah.
trying to pretend that it's like you might as well just bluntly say, like, you're not as pretty as we are, like, because that's the way she's interpreting it. She feels really like alone, I think,
Mhm.
from what
Yeah, for
I've
sure.
read of the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that read on it. I took it as more innocent, but maybe that's my naivete. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Um,
You are very naive, so.
but I appreciate that you would tell me that right
Yeah.
now.
No, you're so
So
smart and so funny, and you're so good at everything.
thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. If you excuse me for one
Um,
moment, I need to go to the bathroom and cry.
um, so yeah, I don't know, I guess, how much else I have to say. I think it's a very interesting set of characters in that they chose to have a celebrity. It's a little like self-referential that it's a bunch of actors in a show,
Yeah,
and there's someone that's a famous actor. But I really like it because it sets up some tensions that felt intriguing to me.
yeah,
Like,
totally.
she's famous, but I don't get the sense she's, like, crazy famous. Just, she would be recognized
Yeah,
most places by at least some people is the sense I got, and
yeah,
she's middle-aged. She's not like this prime,
yeah.
actress that's, like, in her moment at her career in
Hmm.
her career, and she's not with other celebrities. She's trying to have a girl trip with what at least she thinks are her real friends. I mean, it'll be interesting to see the dynamic of how much they are real friends or not, and how much of it is, there's jealousy and there's all the stuff that they actually talked about, which is like, how does it feel when people want something from you?
Hmm.
I like that one of them is a celebrity in that it creates all kinds of interesting jealousies and hierarchy feelings in the relationships, which lend themselves to, I think, concepts that are mirrored for everybody to some degree, where you feel like, oh, someone may have higher status, you're friends with them, but
Hmm.
that they have something going on. It may be more common in female relationships, at least the way I've heard it talked about.
Hmm.
But I thought it's interesting. It sets up some great tensions.
Yeah, it's a very niche context that they're in, but a lot of the themes are very relatable, which is something that the show does well. It's like they do pinpoint certain parts of society, as we talked about before, but if you look deep enough, you can see that a lot of these things are common experiences for people, and therefore the observations you can make from watching how this unfolds can have um, relatable aspects, I guess. So that's something the show
Yeah,
does well, and is one of the things that I really enjoy about it. Is they have a great perspective on life, and they discuss their stories in a way that you can get something from it, even in a fictional context, because it is so intimately based on real life and some of the core aspects of real life.
totally.
So yeah, that brings us to Greg, the bombshell of the episode. If I recall from the end of season two, God, what was her name? The
Uh, Tanya.
Tanya dies in a
Yeah.
way that I was
Yeah.
irritated by because it seems so unbelievable. But
Mhm.
we see that Greg has orchestrated this plot to rob her of her fortune, and she ends up dying while still married to him. So I believe, because the plot was to kill her, and
Mhm.
she amazingly saved herself by shooting everyone else on the boat, and then she goes to escape the boat once the danger has subsided, and she falls down, hits her face, and drowns in the water. So I assume that means Greg has inherited her fortune, which was to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars from what I recall. I don't know if there would
Mm.
be other things at place where, I don't know if he would be sort of this sole beneficiary, or how that would work. She obviously didn't have kids, but I know that some of these financial arrangements can be complex. But clearly, he's inherited some money. He owns a house here, and perhaps he kind of is looking for some more excitement. Someone, perhaps he already has a plan that's in the works, and his girlfriend is assisting him, whether knowingly or unknowingly. But he has proven himself to be a thoroughly untrustworthy, ill-intentioned character, and I think his presence is to introduce those themes into this season as well.
It's got to be. And also, he changed his name. Like we know his name is Greg, or at least that's what it was when he met Tanya. But now he goes by Gary, at least according to
Oh, did they say
Chloe.
Gary?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
he changed
I
his
didn't
name.
catch
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's interesting. And he looked very self-important in the scene, where in season one he was kind of this goofy, bumbling guy, and perhaps that was a character he was playing. Season two, he
Hmm.
was like fed up with Tanya and wasn't willing to obscure it anymore. And now seemed like a very self-important um, person. Like they seem to be making this cliche of a white bald man in Thailand is a loser back home, kind of goes to this place to
Yeah.
artificially inflate their status. It's a poorer
Hmm.
country and whatnot. So he seemed to have some of that same confidence, though he is a local to some degree, it sounds like. So
Hmm.
yeah, I guess that's all the main characters. I guess briefly, there's the very timid um, manager.
General manager
Yeah,
Fabian. Yeah.
which is always a central character in the show. I mean, that was perhaps the main character in season one, Armand. It's very hard to
Hmm.
say who the main character is because there were so many stories happening simultaneously, but a lead for sure. And then season two, was it Marta or something like that? The
Hmm. Hmm.
closeted female general manager who also played an important role,
Hmm.
and I wonder how this different character archetype is going to show up, because he's very timid and unsure of himself, and seemingly wanting to do a good job, and seems to be proficient at his job, but is a very timid character. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes up in the show, because I think if the first two seasons are a predictor, he's going to play an important role at one point or another.
Yeah. I agree. When I heard general manager, I was like,
Yeah,
okay, something's going to happen. I hope you
yeah,
stay alive. You're definitely going to suffer your share of indignities, especially
yep.
because he's so timid.
Yep, he'll be walked on. Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the the only term that's coming to mind is how the charcuterie board of characters they have prepared for us will end in a gunfight on the hotel grounds. So clearly there's some existing tension that erupts, like a active volcano lying in wait for its next eruption, and they're going to torture us with that. It's usually not until at least a third of the way into the very final episode that everything makes sense, which is as it should be, but it's a long time to wait for that resolution, though it's very juicy and exciting along the way.
Yeah, I thought it was set up great, though. I think I was a little worried in the first episode of season two, like maybe this is not going to live up to season one, and I would
Yeah,
agree it didn't. Season one was such a masterpiece of a
yeah,
show, but I like the way season three is starting. I like the characters. I
yeah,
like the tensions. It's going to be interesting. I can't wait to watch the next episode.
yeah. I agree. Season one is definitely my favorite, and it's always hard to do a second season that's better because you have
Yeah,
such a strong first impression from the first season if you liked it, that it's easy for it to pale in comparison. So yeah, I would be just thrilled if I liked this one even close to season one, and if it were better, it's hard to even conceive of that. But yeah, the fact that that's a possibility is exciting. I'm glad to see them in a tropical location because that's part of the nostalgia of the show for me, is that just gorgeous setting and the way they bring in the music and they really transport you to this place. That's one of my favorite things about it.
great point.
And
Me
the
too. I didn't realize that until you
cinematography,
said that.
yeah, the cinematography supports that so well too. I love the variety of shots they've put together. They have these kind of abstract nature shots where they really zoom in on a pattern or something to the point that you know what it
Hmm.
is, but it's just a great way of capturing a local area to really make you feel like you're there versus like these far out helicopter shots or something that we've all gotten used to in movies and television, which are a little more played out in comparison. Uh,
Yeah, I would say they even made the monkeys kind of eerie. I was like, "Oh, what's going on with that
yeah,
monkey? Does he have plans for something?" Yeah.
yeah. Like, will they play a direct role or will it be a symbolism kind of thing? Because monkeys symbolically are, mischievous
Hmm.
and I guess primarily mischievous. So yeah,
Hmm.
did they use the term monkey as well? Yeah, the in the meditation with Zion at the very beginning, she said like,
Hmm.
"Let your monkey mind something wander
Hmm.
or calm or something like that." So, that's
Yep.
intentional. So yeah, they're working their themes in early. Yeah, so very excited to see where episode 2 takes us. Thank you everyone for watching along with us. We hope you'll join us throughout the season. This is one of our favorite shows, if not our favorite show on television. So we're really thrilled to be back at this point where the new season is out. If you want to support the channel, hit the like button and comment and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. You know the drill by now. Totally free and it makes a big difference. And if you enjoyed the discussion, check out some of our other videos on the channel for our podcast, Men's Search for Meaning, where we discuss all sort of relatable concepts and facts of life and things that are much in line with the themes and discussions of the White Lotus. So we hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.